Coaches, we are grateful to be joined today by this year's USA Today National Coach of the Year, San Diego State head coach Brian Dutcher. Coach, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Coach, as a longtime assistant coach with Steve Fisher at Michigan and San Diego State, you certainly have waited your turn. I'm wondering what was easy and what was hard about transitioning to the head coaching position. Maybe let's start with what was easy.
Well, it was easy because I'd been here 17 years with Steve. I think that's what it was. So I knew the program. I knew the kids in the program. I knew the strengths of what San Diego State had. And so I felt like I took over the best job in the conference. And so that made it easy.
Well, and the success has shown that too. And I'm curious then, what maybe was harder than you thought?
Just as when you're a longtime assistant, you sit there and you say, who's going to be me now? Who's going to take my role as an assistant coach? All the things I did for Coach Fisher for all those years. He was the greatest guy in the world to work for. Who am I going to have next to me that's going to make my life easy? And I got a great staff. Dave Velasquez has been with me 16, 17 years. Matt Soria, my director of ops, has been here 16, 17, 18 years. And then Jay Morris, Chris Acker, J.D. Pollock. I've surrounded myself with good people. And that's how great things happen.
That's cool. That's a real cool answer. And I guess the other part about being with Coach Fisher for so long is obviously you learn a lot of the same ideas, I guess. You support each other in what you do. I'm curious what you've done over the years to get outside of the Steve Fisher kind of learning zone, so to speak, and get into your own ideas and your own learning.
I was fortunate enough to grow up around basketball. My dad, Jim Dutcher, was a longtime head coach, Alpena Community College, head coach at Eastern Michigan University. He coached George Gervin there, an assistant with Johnny Orr at Michigan, and then the head coach at the University of Minnesota, where we had players like Kevin McHale, Michael Thompson, Ray Williams, Flip Saunders, the late coach of the Timberwolves, played for him. And so I grew up around the game. So I learned from my dad. I was a student manager, film games, and just loved being around it. And then I worked 2 years with Lou Henson as a grad assistant at the University of Illinois. And Lou's legendary. He's got his name in Champaign on the court there at the Assembly Hall, and he's also got his name on the court at New Mexico State, where he took them to a Final Four and lost to UCLA. And then obviously working for Bill Frieder and Steve Fisher, I've worked with some great head coaches. So I think I've taken a little bit of all of them with me. Yet to be a good head coach, you have to be true to who your personality is. You can't be someone else. So I've got a part of all of them with me, but yet I think I'm my own person.
So when we think about San Diego State, I mean, certainly this year especially, which was tremendous year, tremendous group of obviously players that came together, but you think first about your defense. So I'm curious, how have you built such a strong defensive identity?
Defense has always been a big part of San Diego State basketball. And at times it was a necessity. We didn't have the scores that we have now. And so we had to defend at a high level in order to keep ourselves in games to win. We obviously had length and athleticism. We've had versatile players. And we spent a lot of time on defense. I mean, you're good at what you work at. And so we might spend 50, 60% of practice on defense. And we felt that was important to us. And we've been rewarded for it by having highly ranked defenses almost every year we've been here.
We definitely have. And, you talked a little bit about having better offensive players, but also the other part of that is with great defensive players, we know players matter, but consistently ranked higher as a defensive team than an offensive team. And I'm curious, what factors contribute to that consistent defensive outperformance? Because again, it's not that you're bad on offense, it's just the defense outperforms it. Is it just a case of what you said, emphasis, or is there more to that?
Yeah, it's a big point of emphasis. We work on the fundamentals. We work on communication like all coaches do. And we just spend a lot of time on it, whether it's shell drill, which we do all year. Some teams do shell early in the year and they move beyond it, and it's all defensive schemes for opponents. We stay with our shell all year. We stay with fundamentals all year, closeouts, box outs, things that win games. And so we spend the time on them. Now, everybody does, but we've had good players to go along with that. You don't win just with X's and O's. You have to have the talent to go with it. And we've had kids that have bought into being defensive players first, and they know that's why we win is with our defense. And then offensively, we play with great freedom. We play with freedom within framework. We have set plays we run. We have things we try to accomplish, but we like high IQ guys that can break out of that at any moment and just make a basketball play. So we have freedom within what we do at the offensive end.
That's great. And I want to come back to some of that freedom and talk about that a little bit about the offensive end. But just going into what you mentioned, shell there, do you stick with the same shells throughout the year, or do you load them with extra challenge or different difficulties, or what are you doing with your shell drills throughout the year?
Shell's pretty basic. We try to help early on baseline drive and then V back and take away the pass to the corner. And we try to make those rotations from every position. So we rotate guys around. Obviously, the game has changed with the charge circle. We're trying to go vertical in the charge circle like everybody does, put body on people when they come in the paint. And I think the game's changed over the years. You've had to adapt to that. There used to be a day when a guard would drive in there, if it was any contact at all, the guard would be shooting free throws. And now, if you have big guys that can go vertical in there, and even if the guard initiates the contact, or sometimes the big initiates it, but the refs have come to the point now where they're not calling much of that. And so we work hard on coming over physical presence, going vertical, banging those guards a little bit where we're hard to finish over.
It's such a great point. And I think it leads into the other part, which you guys seem to foul or put an emphasis on not fouling a lot. Is that something that you emphasize and teach too?
Yeah, like all coaches. We're trying to body up on as much as we can. We show our hands. That's the emphasis. When we're playing one-on-one, you can get away with some body contact if you show your hands. They won't call chest to chest if you're moving with him. But as soon as you put a hand on a guy, it's almost an automatic call. So we try to work hard on showing our hands on penetration, initiating some of that contact. We can't give guys free runs to the basket. And we work hard on catching the first move. That's hard to do. It's easy to say. It's hard to do. Catch the first move and make some guy have to spin or cross over. Don't give them straight line drives to that basket.
Love the terminology and love the phrasing. And with that, then closeouts, which you mentioned as well. Do you direction force on closeouts? What are you doing with your hands? What are some of the techniques that you're teaching closeouts wise?
Good teams, they throw those hands, or when they come out there, throw both hands up and get ready to contest that jump shot. The 3-point shot's such a weapon that, every team is trying their best to not allow teams to make a lot of threes. And so we close with high hands. We try to chop our steps. It's hard to do. It's hard to run out, take a jump shot, and then prevent the drive. And so the gap help is so important that we always say, we know you're on a great 3-point shooter, but you have to be in two places at one time. You have to be already in your defensive position early so he sees you there, but you have to be moving back to the shooter. So sometimes when they're freshmen, they don't understand that concept. They think they got to be out on a shooter, and then they get out of their help position. So very rarely do we sacrifice help in order to get to a shooter. We want to be to our help spot, but yet know if a drive is flat or not. If it's a flat drive, start moving back early. If it's a penetrating drive and you decide to attack the ball to try to dig it out, you have to get a hand on it.
So, talking about that gap help, you guys seem as on point as I've seen in a long time with your gap help this year. I'm curious, do you modify it ever for scouting report based on the opponent or the personnel you're playing against?
Yeah, sometimes move, if we're down in the corners, we'll move up the line into gap help. If we're playing a team that's really good at back cutting, that's what they do. We'll flatten down. It all depends on the opponent. So we work on all those things on positioning based on who we're playing and what their strengths are. And, sometimes we'll force to the weak hand. Sometimes we won't. We do a lot of scouting too. We don't just rely on our principles and say we're going to play everybody the same way. Most teams are good at that. They scout and they make adjustments to their game plans. And I think we do that as well as anybody.
Yeah, no, that's such a great point. And no doubt you're very effective at scouting. Couldn't have the record you had without that. But sometimes people get caught up in the fact, you're a gap defensive team so that you don't modify. But the reality is you have to modify for teams and personnel. And it's great to hear the insight into you guys doing that. Or is there anything that you found with scout especially defensively, that has, in your opinion, helped your team move from, say, good to elite?
It's not trying to do everything. It's take one thing away. If it's the ball reversal, if it's you're playing a team that runs set plays, if you can pressure out, maybe you're not a pressure team, but against a set play team, if you can make them catch it one step further out than they want to catch it, to disrupt the timing just enough. And so we'll pressure some teams. Some teams will drop way back, gap up, play really soft, and we'll change game. The thing that made this team great this year is we could guard different ways within the same game, in the same possession. If one guard was really good off a ball screen and we felt if he turned it in, we'd be in trouble, we might jump out and show on that and push him back. But the other guards, we might be in drop. And so we had guys that are smart enough, and that's mostly your post player. Yanni Wetzel was really intelligent, and so he could show on one guard in a position, yet if they ball screen for two other guards, he'd be in drop. And so the ability to play different guys different ways in the same possession was huge to us.
The other part that, as you're talking about that, just struck me as, which is a common problem for teams that are so good in help, is they tend to be not as good at individually covering the ball because they know the help's there, and they know that if they get in trouble, the help's there. I'm curious, what have you built into your players in terms of their mindset about stopping the ball in these one-on-one matchups so you don't have to help?
That's the hardest thing to do, is play one-on-one basketball. Guys are so talented off the dribble now that it's hard to keep anybody in front of you. And so you try to push them one dribble wider than they normally go. You try to catch the first move. Some guys have good feet and they're able to slide right away. Some guys, you have to get into a run right away. They can't slide at all. So as soon as a guy dribbles, some guys on the team, we might just say, you got to get in a run as soon as he puts it on the floor. And if he crosses over and he goes the other direction, so be it. But you have to catch the first move and not give straight line drive. And it's challenging because the offensive players are so good now that keeping a guy in front of you is the hardest thing to do in basketball.
Sorry, I'm curious with that then, are we changing some of the traditional, say, old school fundamentals in terms of covering the ball because we have to modify to just better and better offensive players?
Yeah, absolutely. You got to close a guy short if he's a non-shooter. You got to run a guy off if he is a shooter. And, we've always had great shot blocking, and that's the ultimate savior. That center position is so critical defensively because so many teams are setting ball screens. So you have to have a center that can defend multiple ball screens. You have to have a center that if it gets by, he's the last line of defense, that he can take a charge or he can block a shot or he can change a shot. And that center position is so critical to anchoring any defense. And so at times, all coaches, we err on the side of trying to find a guy that's really good offensively in that position. But I would argue if you could find a guy that's a elite defender, that you can win a lot of games. He doesn't have to be super good offensively. Now, obviously, you want both, and that's what we all strive for. But I think the defensive position from that center position is absolutely critical to being good.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, you lost your rim protector for part of the season this year?
Yeah, we had Nathan Mesa early in the year, and he dropped out just as we were getting into January conference play, and we didn't have him the rest of the year. And so we had to play differently. We were big at that time. We were starting Nathan Mesa and Yanni Wetzel, two really bigs, and they did a great job together. But when we lost Nathan, we went small, which made us more hard to guard at the offensive end. But defensively, we missed the shot blocking.
Well, and that's what my curiosity was, just how you adapted to that, since you do put such emphasis on shot blocking and rim protection. What type of adjustments, say, if I'm a high school coach and I don't have that, what type of emphasis can I place on help at the rim?
You just got to come over. Yanni was strong, so he wasn't thin. So he came over and went vertical and made him finish through his body. Obviously, he wasn't the shot blocker Nathan was, but he did a good job with his early help and making him finish through contact. And I thought that was important to us.
Yeah, that's good. And you guys made a big leap this year too. And you mentioned this already in offensive efficiency especially versus last year. I think from 184th to, is it 11th? Something like that you went from?
I'm not sure what it ended
Yeah,
up.
something significant in terms of that. So I'm curious, what type of things led to kind of the improvement on offense to go with the defense?
We had a lot of really good passers on the team, and that always helps. Malachi Flynn was 3-1 assist to turnovers. KJ Fagan was 2-1 assist to turnovers. Trey Pulliam was 2-1 assist to turnovers. So where most teams have one guy, you're fortunate to have one guy that's 2-1 assist to turnovers. We had 3 guys, and those numbers were all high. And then you add Matt Mitchell, Jordan Shackle, guys that can pass the ball. Yanni was a good passer. So we had good passers. And so they were able to create for themselves and also create for a teammate.
And I'm curious, then, having great passers, which you identify to a certain extent, you recruit if you can, what type of modifications do you make on offense? Is that what leads to freedom for you? Is that because you have better passers, you're able to give them more freedom?
Yeah, we had better passers and we had really good shooters. So we spaced the floor really well. You know, we made sure we had the spacing as best we could most possessions. Yanni was dangerous in the low post. So if we threw it in there to him, if he drew a double team, he was a really good passer. We always got an open 3 out of a double. If they didn't double, he was talented enough to score 1-on-1, and that's basketball. You know, you don't want anybody trying to score over 2 defenders. So if we drew the second defender, we did a good job of getting off and moving the ball to a teammate and then playing off that. And so we had guys that were unselfish, not trying to force the issues. And that comes from veteran players. You know, you're always teaching. We teach every day. But we had 5th-year senior Yanni Wetzel, 5th-year senior KJ Fagan, 4th-year junior Malachi Flynn, 3rd-year juniors Matt Mitchell, Jordan Shackle. We had a veteran team. And so when you have veterans that have played a lot of basketball, they know how to play, and then you just have to put them in the best positions to be successful.
Spacing-wise, then, are you spacing to corners, to slots, or are you spacing 45s to slots? What's the spacing concepts that you're using nowadays?
It's the same as everybody. It's at the 45s. It's in the deep corners, you know, and knowing when to lift, when to stay put, you know, letting great players play in space. You know, so the tendency is we all get back to when we're little kids and we all run to the ball. And so I just tell them, you're all really good players and you all can score, but no one can score if the space isn't there. And so we have to look at the NBA model. We have to see how well they space the floor, how they move the ball. And that's the gold standard. That's poetry, the way they play. And we have to try to aspire to play as much like that as we can.
I agree with that, and that's why you guys were very enjoyable to watch on both sides of the ball, which obviously reflects that. But the other question that goes with freedom is defining shot selection. You talked about your players being unselfish and looking for each other, but what goes into defining shot selection in a freer system?
I never sweat a guy on shots. You know, I try to, when we watch tape, encourage good play, moving the ball, spacing the floor, and I have a tendency to show good play. I don't show bad play at the offensive end because I think in some players' minds, if they see on tape that they're open and they didn't get the ball, then they want to say, well, I was wide open. He didn't give it to me. Why would I want to give it to him? They just get caught up in it too much. So I encourage good play. I show only good play to encourage it. And so everybody likes to be praised. And so if I've got guys out there making good plays, I'm praising them. And then everybody wants to be that guy that's getting praised. And so we're showing that the right way to play. And if you play this way, you'll be rewarded. And I had guys that could accept the fact that they might score 21 game and then the next game only score 8 or 6 and realize that it wasn't your night. It was someone else's night, and your night may come again in 2 games, but it's not your night every night. It depends on how you're being guarded, who's guarding you, what their game plan is, and we can't fight their game plan. We have to take what they give us to a degree. And I had guys that bought into that knew that every night wasn't their night and that they weren't afraid to share the ball and let someone else have their night.
Sounds right. And in that philosophy of offense, what are you doing defensively in terms of review? Are you sharing mistakes on the defensive end with them in terms of review?
Hey, Coach, going to interrupt this podcast for a brief message from show partner, Simply Safe. With home security, there's 2 ways you can go about protecting your home. There's the traditional way, where you wait weeks for a technician to do a messy installation that costs a small fortune, or there's the other way, Simply Safe. Simply Safe is everything you need in a home security system. It's award-winning protection, 2-time winner of CNET Editor's Choice Award. Simply Safe blankets your whole home in safety. You get comprehensive protection for your entire home. Outdoor cameras and doorbells alert you to anyone approaching your home. Entry, motion, and glass break sensors guard inside. You barely notice it's there. But what's truly remarkable is you can set up this system all by yourself. Anyone can do it. It takes 30 minutes to an hour tops, and there's absolutely no trade-offs to your safety. You'll have an army of highly trained security experts ready to dispatch police to your home at a moment's notice 24/7. And it's only 50 cents a day with no contracts. It's why The Verge calls Simply Safe the best home security system. Go to simplysafe.com/team today and you'll get free shipping and a 60-day risk-free trial. You've got nothing to lose. Go now and be sure you go to simplysafe.com/team. That's simplysafe.com/team. The perfect hire can have an impact on your business for years to come. So when you need to find that next person to help grow your business, LinkedIn Jobs will match the right talent with your open role fast. I personally use LinkedIn, and I know many of you in the coaching profession do too. Did you know LinkedIn has over 675 million members worldwide? LinkedIn Jobs screens candidates with the hard and soft skills you're looking for so you can hire the right person fast. Things like collaboration, creativity, adaptability. LinkedIn looks beyond the work skills and puts your job post in front of qualified candidates who match your business requirements perfectly. That's how LinkedIn makes sure your job post is seen by the people you want to hire, people with the skills, qualifications, and other interests that will help your business grow. It's no wonder a person is hired every 8 seconds with LinkedIn. Find the right person for your business today with LinkedIn Jobs. You can pay what you want and get the first 50 off. Just visit linkedin.com/team. Again, that's linkedin.com/team to get $50 off your first job post. Terms and conditions apply. Now back to the podcast.
We're watching every mistake at the defensive end.
Yeah.
Because defense is a lot more absolutes. You know, you should have helped, you should have stunted, you should have closed out better, you gave straight line drive. Those are absolutes. In offense, if you watch tape with your whole coaching staff and a guy will take a shot and you say, okay, let's grade the shot. One coach may say, that's an awful shot. One coach may say, well, that's an okay shot. And one coach may say, well, he just made 2 threes in a row. It's a heat check. I'm good with that. So offense is so subjective. Everyone's got a different opinion on every shot. And so I don't try to micromanage shots too much. I try to encourage good play and take your shot. And a lot of guys, it's like when you have a big man that wants to shoot the 3. Some people think that's a problem. If you got a big man that wants to shoot the 3, you got to let him shoot once in a while. And if he misses, trust me, he'll know in his own mind, I can't take anymore. I don't feel it. If he makes one, he might make 2 or 3. And usually players figure out their own games. They know if they're missing something, they're going to find something else to do. I think coaches, if they try to micromanage a player, can steal a player's confidence. And once you steal their confidence, they're not very good offensively after that.
That's an incredible point. That's great to share, and for coaches to think about that way in terms of what's absolute and what's subjective. So the other thing, I don't think we think enough as coaches about spacing on defense, and great spacing in terms of your defense would be that you can cover the ball and still stay compact in other areas. I'm imagining the other benefit of that is that it leads to great rebounding, which is I see your team have 4 or 5 guys in the paint on defensive rebounds most possessions. Is that a result of your defensive spacing and an emphasis, or what are some of the characteristics that have led to that success?
I mean, boxing out is hard to do. I mean, it's like great shooters. You know, you can work at it, but a great shooter is a great shooter, and an average shooter usually continues to be average. He might improve a little bit. That's the same thing with rebounding. You have to recruit a rebounder. Everyone thinks you're going to get a guy that you just tell them to go and they're going to get it. Some guys have a nose for the ball. And so offensive rebounding is hard, you know, unless you have a guy that's got a talent for it. Defensive rebounding, you've got to work on boxing out and hitting somebody. And we weren't overly big. We played pretty small the back half of the year. So boxing out was really important. And the other emphasis is you try to tell them this is not the NBA. Not many rebounds are taken above the rim, at least where we're playing. And you have to have a nose for the ball. You have to run the ball down. It's going to hit the floor. It's going to be at shoulder level before it's grabbed most of the time. And you have to pursue it. So we work hard on pursuing the ball.
And you referenced already just the modern game, the spacing to the 3-point line. Has that impacted in any way what you teach in terms of perimeter rebounding? I mean, it used to be box out all 5 spots, but with the spacing, sometimes that's not as important to be able to box out the perimeter player as much as you said to go pursue the ball. So how much has that changed over time?
I think coaches are more, and I think it started in the NBA more than anywhere. You watch a shot in the NBA, usually 3 or 4 guys are moving back on the lift to the defensive end. They don't want guys with this ability and ball handling to get one-on-one opportunities on a broken floor or get open threes. And so I think teams are making less of an emphasis on going to the offensive glass, and they'd rather err on the side of sending 2 and 3 guys back on the lift in order to prevent easy baskets, because it's harder and harder to score in the half court at that offensive end. Obviously the NBA's got a more spread floor with their length of their lane and their defensive rules. The college game, you can still compact that defense and make it hard. So, if you've got good offensive rebounders and you say, let's roll the dice, we send 3 or 4, they're going to have to send 3 or 4 to box out. If you have a strength there, then you should take advantage of it. But we were pretty small, and so we erred on the side of making sure we had 2 guys back on every shot. And if we were playing a really good running team, not be afraid to send 3 guys back on the lift.
It's good stuff. And the other part that goes with being a really good help team is that sometimes when you do help at the rim or you rotate early and help, as you said, that you remove one player on the boards. Are you teaching something specific on the weak side in terms of cover down rebounds or different things like that?
Yeah, I think most teams got to work on a V-back rebound. Like if the big has to help on a ball screen, that we don't need 2 guys on the guy as he drives in there and takes a runner over a big. We need that guard to break off and V-back and box out the opposite big. Not necessarily get the ball, just get into his legs and keep him from getting it. So that's stuff you work on every day. On penetration, where guards got to V-back and box a big. That's a everyday occurrence.
Love that. Love that. Such an important part and underrated part of it, obviously, in terms of that. So it seems to me you're still doubling the post. Is that right?
Not as much as we used to. We had depth at the position, early in the year, and we still had guys off the bench. And so most teams will double until they start giving up open threes. And so you always run the balance of saying, are we going to give up tough 2s in the low post and stay extended, and so we're not giving open threes? And that's scouting specific. Some bigs, you can double on the catch, and they're not very good passers. Some are good passers on the catch, but once they dribble it, they can't pick it up and pass it. You might go on the bounce. And so doubling the post is more scout specific than anything.
Yeah, I was just curious. I mean, Coach Fisher was one of the first that I studied watching them. It was an automatic, right? Anytime the ball went in the post, it was an automatic. And it's one of the things that you've changed with this more modern game. Obviously, probably he started to change that as well, just with the importance of the 3-point shot. Yeah,
we'll still double. We'll come big to big. You got to have high hands and not give a direct pass. You got to give your guards time to get to a guy. Most teams now, it seems even in the college level, are playing the high side and they're playing the bottom eye to come on the bounce to double. Whether it's a guard big, they're trying to play really high and send it, the guy spinning to the baseline and doubling from that angle. We got some teams in our conference that are very good at that. And so every game plan creates issues and every double creates issues. If you don't have a good passing big man, you got huge issues.
Yeah, definitely in terms of that. Now, I know as coaches, we have a hard time being satisfied, even though you had an incredible defensive year. I'm curious, what is one area of your defense you'd still like to improve?
I was surprised how good we were defensively this year because I was concerned. We've always had bigger guards, and so we always had length. And I think length is really important at the defensive end. But KJ and Malachi weren't overly big kids. They were 6 foot, 6'1", but they're not 6'4", 6'5" guards. And so they did a great job. KJ, in particular, always drew the hardest offensive player to guard on the other team, and he just did it with grit and toughness. He just knew how to play. And so his years he spent with Herb Sindak at Santa Clara obviously prepared him well. He was a tough, hard-nosed defender. And so I was surprised with our lack of length, how good a defensive team we really were.
So you referenced a transfer. You've had great success with transfers. And what I'm curious about is how have you gotten so much buy-in, relatively fast, immediate, maybe, with some of these players coming to your program from different programs? What have been some of the keys with that?
You got to take the right kids. You got to take kids that are about the right things, that want to win beyond all else, that are, when they visit, when KJ visited and we had Malachi, we knew Malachi was a high volume scorer. And so KJ visited, and he was a big scorer at Santa Clara. But he told me on the visit, Coach, I want to win more than anything else. And I had a score at Santa Clara. I didn't necessarily want to score all the time, but it ended up in my hands a lot. He said, I want to be a point guard. I want to be a pass-first player. Obviously, I want to score, but I'm not afraid to be a pass-first player. And so when kids say stuff like that on the visit, you kind of know what their character is and what their expectations are. You can't bring a kid in and know he wants to shoot it every time, and he tells you he wants to score when he gets there, and then be surprised he's shooting it every time he gets it. So you have to make good decisions for your program, what you need, and make sure you're recruiting character as much as you're recruiting talent.
One other part that you kind of referenced there a little bit is, I imagine, being honest with them about what it's going to be when they get there, right? I mean, they know that coming there, they're going to be asked to play defense. They're going to be asked to rebound and do these things that have made your program so successful.
Yeah, we've had kids that from our own conference call kids that are transferring that they know and say, you should go to San Diego State. They're going to let you rock at the offensive end, but you got to play defense and you're not going to play there. So people know what our program is. They know we play with great offensive freedom, but they know you're not going to get on the floor unless you guard at a high level. And so that's a good thing. I like people to know what the expectations of our program are. So if they choose not to want to play that way, there are other great choices for it. But you have to defend if you're going to play at San Diego State.
In some of those early season meetings, practices, whatever it may be, what are some things that you're doing to build that buy-in as well? Is it a case of education through presentations? Is it education on the floor? Is it just simply we get to work? What are some of the things that build buy-in within, team sessions?
Kids got to like each other, and you can't control that as a coach all the time. You can do team building. You can do all that. But we were special this year because the kids liked each other, and it's nothing we could manufacture. You can't make clashing personalities like each other. You can make them get along and get the best you can out of clashing personalities. But we were good this year because we had kids that genuinely liked each other. They loved the game of basketball. When you went in the gym, they were always in there working. We knew we had hard workers, and it was one of those teams that everyone fell in place. Sometimes you don't have those teams, and it's harder work, where you're getting guys that clash personality-wise, and you have to do some team building and try to encourage them to do things the right way. And at that time, it's like you're the dripping water. You just one drop at a time, you're going to carve a hole in that stone. It might take a century, but you have to deliver the consistent message and keep that water dripping on that message. And eventually your hope is it's going to get through. It won't get through in one day, but if you're consistent with the message you deliver and it's the right message every day, eventually you will form a hole that goes through that rock.
Great analogy, dripping water. Awesome. Coach, I've been to your campus. Your campus is arguably one of the most beautiful and fun locations I've ever been to. So I'm curious, you already referenced your players being in the gym on their own by themselves with each other. How do you keep players focused and caring about being in the gym?
They got to love basketball. I mean, there's guys, obviously we all have guys in the program, like when they get to the gym, they work like crazy, but they won't go on their own. And so there's always a mix. And so you're obviously better off when you've got guys that love basketball, that want to just be in there on their own, that's their life, that they're not distracted by social things and they're using basketball to improve their status on campus, that they truly have a love for the game. They want to win and they want to do things the right way. And we don't always have kids like that, but if you have the majority of your team like that, they can pull the other kids along. They can say, this is the way it's done. And if you want to be good, this is the way you have to do it. Now, maybe you don't have everybody doing it, but if the majority of them love it and they want to do it, then good things will happen.
So I'm curious, when they're alone in the gym, Are they usually doing some type of prescribed workout? Are they free to shoot on their own? Do you have shooting competitions or shooting charts or other incentives for them? Or is it just, again, self-motivation?
We can't keep them out of the gym, some of them, which is a problem.
Yeah.
And honestly, I look at it as a problem. Like, we work them, we'll do an individual, then we'll have a team practice, and then all of a sudden they'll be back in there later at night and they'll wonder why their wrist hurts or why their legs are tired. They can't keep themselves out of the gym. And sometimes that's almost like an OCD. It's obsessive. And there's times we have to say you can't go in the gym. And it's great. That's a great problem to have. But we're doing a lot more individual work, and then shortening team practices. Some coaches, they'll spend a lot of time shooting in a team practice, but it's never the quality as one-on-one. And so we'll look at breaks in the day when a guy will have a break in the day, and we'll try to get him in there for 45 minutes. And then maybe we'll only go 90 minutes on the floor of practice. Rarely do we go over 90 minutes as a team. And we're building the team in that 90, but we're building skills individually.
Good point. Good adjustment to their desire to be in the gym too. And then when they are on their own in the gym, are they just free shooting? Are they doing a workout on their own?
It all depends on the guy, where he's come from. Most of these guys have played a lifetime, and they've had a coach or a trainer or a parent that's shown them the basics and what they think is important. Most of these guys, they've had someone in their lives that's taught them how to play the game, whether it's a parent, a trainer, a middle school coach, a youth coach, AAU coach. And so we embrace that. We want them to bring a little bit of what they've had growing up with them. And so they have drills and they have things that they've had their whole lives that can get them back on track. And so when they're in there by themselves, they'll do some of that. When they're with us, we're trying to do things that we think are important to help make them a better player.
Great point about embracing it. And I know that's a reality of dealing with players nowadays that have their own trainers or different things like that. So that's such a great point. The other part that I'm curious about is that obviously with a defensive focus in your program, what does your summer program look like? Because defense isn't necessarily the most fun to be able to deal with in the off season. So I'm curious how you embrace that, or do you not within the off season?
Not as much in the off season. We're working on offensive skills. Maybe we'll have a guy that has a deficiency closing out or playing one-on-one. We may take that one guy, but guys that already do it well, they don't need to spend extra time on it. When we had 2 years ago, when we had a bunch of freshmen, they couldn't pick things up fast enough, so we'd have to keep them after practice, or we'd bring them before a walkthrough on game day to show them exactly what we wanted. And so the learning curve is important. Freshmen have a hard time making the adjustment to college defensively. Offensively, their skill level is usually pretty good. They just need to learn shot selection and spacing. But defensively, we're not afraid to keep a guy that's behind after or do extra with him at the defensive end. And we can't slow the whole team down to try to get a guy better, but yet we get him better on his own.
You referenced newcomers or freshmen just struggling with some defensive concepts, which I totally agree. That's the hardest adjustment for a player moving from high school to college. Do you find it, is it pace? Is it physicality? Is it scheme? What's the hardest adjustment?
It's playing things multiple ways. It's the talent of the guy they're going against. It's being a help defender. You got to help and you got to guard your man. You have to play two people. And this responsibilities are so much greater, and the talent they're going against is so much greater. And so they have to work on their individual defense, then they have to work on their team defense, and then they have to learn terminology, play ball screens 2 or 3 different ways. Where in high school, they might only have to play them 1 or 2 ways. Maybe they play them 3 or 4 ways in college, and the learning curve is just really sharp for them.
So what advice, after having gone through obviously a tremendous career in coaching, what advice do you have to assistant coaches that are, again, waiting their turn? They're doing the right things. They're putting in the work. They're being the best assistant they can. What type of advice do you have for them?
I just tell them what I tell my own staff. You have to choose your own path. And whether it's what it is, I don't know. I can't tell you. You have to choose your path. For me, it was approaching coaching like it was a marathon instead of a sprint. Because I grew up around it. So I know how hard it can be. And And some guys, assistants, they have some success and they want to get that head job. They take a bad head job and they think they're going to resurrect the program. And 3 or 4 years later, they're out of work and they can't get back into coaching. So I just wanted to be very careful with the steps I took, who I surrounded myself with. And I wanted to be on a path where the job I took, I thought was a really good one. And it turned out that way. San Diego State, like I said earlier, I feel is the best job in the Mountain West Conference. And it didn't start that way when we came here. Coach Fisher did a great job resurrecting this program and turning into what it is. And now it's a nationally ranked program. It's one of the better programs in the West Coast, if not the country. And I was patient and I took my time to get the job I wanted. And this is it.
Well, it's awesome to see. It's awesome to see your success as you continue to build and grow the legacy of San Diego State basketball. Coach, I cannot thank you enough for taking some time and spending some time and sharing the game with us. Just very, very concise, brilliant answers, and I appreciate you doing this.
Thanks for having me.
Coach, it is finally here. Go to www.dougnovakbasketball.com today to get 3 all-access practices, a finishing video, and a full team film session from one of the best basketball educators in the world, Doug Novak of Bethel University. Open the doors and get full access to 3 practices, 1 full unedited film session, and a point-of-attack instructional finishing video. That's www.dougnovakbasketball.com to learn more, or go to www.bivideoproductions.com to see all the ways we are sharing the game. To find out more about Coach and all we spoke about today, please take a look at the show notes for today's episode. I love to share the game and have basketball coaching conversations, so connect with me on social media. You can find all my social media information and all your membership, clinic, and consulting needs at basketballimmersion.com. That concludes today's episode. I know there are so many podcasts out there. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the Basketball Podcast with me, your host, Chris Oliver. Please subscribe and share the podcast with your friends and colleagues so that we can keep bringing you the best of what's out there and share the game.